on our yoga mat. But mindfulness is something we can apply to everything. It's something that we, 100% present with this, whatever it is that we're doing. And as I said, it's very important. I think when we come to eat, being relaxed and aware that we're actually eating, it can be really important. So although I'm going to do a little meditation today, just on an ongoing basis, even just taking a few deep breaths before you eat, or just pulling yourself away from your desk and taking a moment to acknowledge that now I am eating. It doesn't need to be like a full practice or anything like that, but it's just that awareness that we are eating. So what I would like you to do today, so just making sure you've got your food nearby, because we'll come back to that in a moment. I'd just like you to sit comfortably wherever you are, on a chair, on the floor. And I would just like you to close your eyes and relax your shoulders and relax your neck. And just become aware of your breath. Just aware of the rise and fall of your chest. And as you breathe in, feel your chest expand. And as you breathe out, just feeling it soften and deflate. We're drawing awareness to our breath without trying to change anything or control anything, simply to be aware that we are breathing. This awareness of our breath is the fastest way for us to connect to our body, to bring us into the present moment, to bring our attention to the here and now, rather than our mind being somewhere else and caught up in past and future. Just continuing to be aware of your breath in and out. And thoughts may enter your mind, and that's perfectly okay. Simply be aware of them like a passing of a bird in the sky. Thoughts sort of come and go. We don't have to attach to those thoughts. We're a body with thoughts, without being those thoughts. Just relaxing through your whole body, relaxing your head, your neck, shoulders, all the way through to your fingers, down your back. Thinking of your buttocks relaxing and sinking into the chair, and relaxing all the way down to your toes. And just think of your body becoming heavier and heavier and more relaxed. And bring your awareness to your entire body, to all the sensations in your body right now. So you might be able to feel the clothing against your skin, or air movement. Maybe there's some discomfort. There could be hunger right now. Just noticing these sensations in the body without labeling them. Just bring your awareness down to your stomach. And do you feel any sensations of hunger? What do these feel like? Is there an aching in your stomach or an emptiness in your stomach? Do you feel satisfied and full? Or is it discomfort, or aches and pains and tweaks? Just accepting those sensations as they are right now. So one of the things with mindfulness is we can really bring our awareness to the sensations in our body of hunger and ask ourselves, are we hungry right now? Often we eat because it's lunchtime or dinner time or other people are eating, without tuning into our own body and determining for ourselves, are we hungry? Are we hungry that we want a meal? Hungry that we want a snack? Or are we quite satisfied? Or are we hungry for something else? Some other joy or pleasure or comfort or connection? Often we reach for food to satisfy emotional needs when there's not a true hunger there. It's just being aware of that hunger. Just coming back to your breath and the passage of air through your nose and down your throat, into that feeling in your chest and stomach, that rising and falling of your stomach. And the food that you eat sort of follows this very similar pathway, moving through your mouth and down your throat and into your stomach, small intestines and large intestines. So just focusing on that sort of path that our breath and food takes. And our digestive system happens, it sort of happens without our control or our awareness. Our body has the ability to digest the food that we eat without any conscious effort from ourselves. You know, we can break down all the nutrients that we provide our body, and our body can transport these nutrients to all the cells in our body wherever it's required without us having to do a thing. Our only role is to provide the nourishment for our body. And if we're aware that we're eating, aware of what we're eating in a slow, mindful, conscious state, we can support our body in that integration of nutrients through our entire body. So just ask you to bring yourself back into your room. So you can keep your eyes closed just for a moment and just be aware of where you're sitting, to any sounds around you, maybe the sound of your breathing, noticing the sound of the breath at your nostrils, and noticing any smells around you. Maybe it's your food that you can smell. Is there any tastes in the mouth? Any salivation for the food to come? So we're just bringing an awareness of the sensory experience around us. So we were just aware of our body, and now we're just becoming aware of the space that we're in and the sensory experience of being in that space. The sounds, the smell, the taste, the feel of our body on our chair. And I'll just get you to start to wriggle your body. Just wake yourself up a little bit. You can wriggle your fingers and toes and turn your head from side to side. And I'll have you just partially open your eyes and glance at your food. So hopefully you have some food in front of you that you can take a little look at. And just have a look at the food that's in front of you. It's a bit hard for me to see. And I just want you to sort of, first of all, notice the shapes and the textures and the colours of the food. And we're not labelling anything or thinking about whether this is healthy or unhealthy or whether I should or shouldn't be eating it. But just does it look appealing? Does it look interesting and inviting to eat this food? So just having a look at it and just taking in all of the sort of sensory experience that you're exposed to there with the colours and the shapes and the shadows. And then I'll get you to take a little piece of food, so whether you got a fork or a spoon, or for me, I've got pieces of fruit there. I can see some forks into videos there, which is great. Just bring the food to our nose and take a smell of the food. So noticing how that smells. Maybe there's some memories that come to mind, or some emotions that come to mind. So really just being aware of that smell. And then you can take a bite. So just biting into your food. I'll have a bite. And noticing the sort of sound and texture as you bite, and then as you start to chew, noticing the flavors. That's a bit hard for me to chew. And as you chew the food, you'll notice that the texture and taste starts to change as well. And this is, you know, as we're eating, we're sort of, each mouthful is another sensory experience. Often when we're eating a big bowl or plate of something that's, you know, very much the same thing, we're just eating because it's there in front of us, rather than being aware of each mouthful as we go. So you can continue eating and just aware of like the sort of sound of your chewing, the sound of the food against your under your teeth, the sound of swallowing. There might be some gurgling happen at some point. And just noticing if it's still, as you each mouthful as enjoyable as the previous mouthful. So often we eat because everything, you know, we've been taught to eat everything that's on our plate, and we just keep eating rather than tuning into our body as we eat and determining, do we enjoy this or do we want something else to eat? Am I feeling satisfied with what I'm eating? So when we sort of focus on the rules of what we should or shouldn't be eating, we might end up eating too much or not enough. And particularly there's sort of this cycle of not eating enough because we feel ashamed and guilty about eating. And so we have meals that we eat like a little sparrow, and we're eating a very small amount of food, trying to control the eating. And then we can end up being so hungry that later on we find ourselves eating out of control. So being sort of mindful of each mouthful, and am I satisfied? So when we finish a meal, do I feel satisfied? You're not to the point of being overly full, but feeling like I've been nourished. I've got the energy to get through the rest of my day. I can see you there, Sonia. So it's nice to see some people mindfully eating. So really it's about that awareness, and without the sort of trying to control your eating and trying to eat a specific way. And aware of things like hunger sensations as we eat as well. And I find with mindful eating, like today we've gone through I suppose, you know, all of the senses. So really it's bringing all your senses into the eating experience, the sight of smell, sight, touch, taste, feel, all, you know, bringing all these sorts of that sensory experience into eating. However, sometimes I find it's really useful just to focus on one thing at a time. Like, it's not something you have to do every single time you eat. So sometimes I will just focus on sound, for example, and maybe I'm drinking a coffee, and I just take a moment to sort of hear the teaspoon, you know, in the coffee, hear, you know, me having a little sip, the swallowing. And, you know, it's something that I can tune into, say, in a busy coffee shop. It's just to focus on that one sensory experience. So that's sort of one thing that I find is quite useful, and just switching up the sense that I'm focused on. And another thing is to pick a meal once a week, once a day, where you eat mindfully, to bring your full awareness to the experience of eating, so that you sort of find yourself doing that more often and a little bit more spontaneously as well. And, you know, as you're eating as well, being aware of like what thoughts are coming up. So, you know, as we're mindfully eating, we're not trying to, as I said before, not trying to attach to any thoughts or eat to any rules, but it is useful to sort of become aware of what those thoughts and rules are. Like, we find ourselves resisting mindfully eating, what is it that we're resisting? Or if there's thoughts of, I should or shouldn't be eating this, thinking about how that's impacting you. So if I'm thinking I shouldn't be eating this, and then I end up not eating enough, and then I find myself hungry later, and then I overeat later. We're just becoming aware of the behaviours that we have around food and the beliefs that we have around food as well. And one thing I wanted so you can continue eating if you've got food there with you, and continue to be mindful. I know sometimes it can be hard when you're listening to someone else to continue to be mindful. And that's where, having a bit of a practice where you're practicing it on your own can be beneficial, because longer term you'll be able to do it with other people in a social gathering and things like that as well. And as I said before, like, just focusing on one sense can sometimes be a little bit easier in certain situations, just to focus on the one thing rather than trying to focus on everything all at once. And I suppose, there's no perfect way to eat mindfully. It's just taking a moment to be aware that you're actually eating. So one thing I wanted to say about mindful eating as well is there's a lot of talk at the moment about emotional eating with everything that's going on the planet, and I think we can feel sort of guilty and ashamed for reaching for food for pleasure and joy. And yet I think intuitively we know, like, obviously we have associations with food and, using food as a comfort, but also we get that momentary enjoyment when we eat food because the senses are sort of coming alive. But often if we're eating distracted, we're not fully embracing that sensory experience of eating. And so we can sort of feel guilty and ashamed. But I think sometimes emotional eating is a desire to sort of tap into this sensory experience and just to take some time out from our busy, stressful lives. But if we're eating distracted, on the run, other thoughts going on in our mind, and we're not fully present with our eating, we can end up sort of feeling guilty and ashamed of our eating. And that can sort of then lead us, when next time we eat, we're trying to control how we're eating and not sort of listening to our own body. So I thought I'd just see if there's have we had any questions or anything? Or is there any questions? Anyone there? Let me just see.
Sorry, I've just opened it up. For questions. I had them all on mute. So if anyone has questions, please do ask.
Yes, I had a question. When we eat on the dining table with our family and our kids, is it a good practice to be talking and having conversations? Because, on one hand, that's the time sometimes you get with family. So should we all be focused on our own food and, enjoying it and not be talking? Sorry, we can't hear you. You're on mute. Tansy, we can't hear you.
Yes, all right, sorry. No, I actually think that dining as a family is really important for a variety of different reasons. Obviously that social connection is really important. And as I said before, like, you can still mindfully eat in other people's presence as well. So it's acknowledging your own hunger signals and fullness signals and being, aware of the experience of eating with the presence of other people. It's definitely possible to do so. But the other thing about eating with other people is that there's a lot of pleasure and joy in that in itself. And that has benefits for digestion and health as well. Like when we look at, countries that really prioritize eating together as a family, we see a lot more health benefits of that. So I think it's sort of one of those things that, we're wanting to eat mindfully and maybe taking some time to ourselves to eat mindfully, but, we can do it with other people. And, one of the things that we can do as a family together is even just take a moment to oh, isn't this salad really lovely? You know, what do you like about the salad? And we can talk about the sensory experience of that salad. Like this, you know, I like there's crispy bits, and I like this sweet, you know, sweet part of it. So we can actually bring a little tiny bit of sensory experience and mindfulness into eating, even when we're with a family or with small children, for example. But yeah, we definitely don't need to sort of sit quietly with our meal as a family and not interact with each other, because that has a lot of health benefits as well. But I think generally we do eat more mindfully when we're with other people and we're sort of in a joyful space as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Tansy, I have a question. I remember you wrote a piece for Yoga Hood about diets don't work. And I thought it'd be good for you to just touch on that, you know, because everyone goes through some diet or the other. And there was this advice from you that, you know, if you think dieting from one keto to this to that is going to work, it's not going to work. So I thought I'd just take this opportunity to ask you why you think it won't work.
So there's a lot of research around diets, and I won't go into that because it gets a little bit boring, but essentially, you know, the research shows that 95% of diets don't work, that people end up going back to their old way of eating. And I think, you know, a lot of it's because we apply like a lot of pressure and stress on ourselves to eat a certain way, whether it's to achieve a goal or it's just to perfect our eating. And rather than sort of listening to our own body and focusing on our intuition around eating, there's a focus on rules and like an external focus of how we should be eating. And that's something that's incredibly draining, exhausting, stressful. It can lead to different types of eating. So for some people, it can lead to, you know, either I'm doing this perfectly or I'm not doing it at all. It can lead to disordered eating behaviors where we're on a restrict and binge cycle. So there's a lot to it, but I think fundamentally it's that we lose the ability to listen to our own body and trust our own body and believe that someone else out there has the answers as to how we should be eating, when our body knows. You know, if your body's not responding well to a certain food, or you feel hungry at a certain time of the day, or you feel like you need more protein, your body can tell you that, and we can sort of, I suppose, experiment with our bodies and be a little bit curious as to what works for us and what doesn't work for us. But diets really sort of take us away from trusting ourselves and listening to ourselves and sort of focusing on someone else's rules and imposing that on ourselves. And
the point being that it's not going to last, right?
Yeah, it doesn't last. Yeah, that's probably the main thing. Like there's, you know, one is there's no perfect diet. There's no perfect way to eat. We're all different, and, you know, we're different biologically, but we're also different in terms of our associations with food, our preferences for food. And so, you know, for one person, for me to say this is the perfect way to eat is ignoring your whole history with food. How does your family get together around food? You know, what are past associations and beliefs and fears that you might have around fear that I don't? So it's really not acknowledging our own relationship with food, and finding, you know, what is the most important things for me to nourish my body. And, you know, we can do that in so many different ways. So whether you want to be vegetarian or vegan, or you know, whatever way you want to eat, it's honoring that as well, because there's so many reasons that we eat what we eat, and nutrition is only one of those.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? So yes, I suppose mindful eating is sort of like the first part of really learning to listen to and trust our own body. So like there was some interesting research done, I think it was in the 30s, and it was actually done with orphans who'd never been taught by a parent how to eat. And they had these orphans, and they decided to not show them how to eat. They would just put out big platters of whole foods and allowed the children to choose what they did and didn't eat. And what they found is that the children over, a week's period would eat a balanced diet. Like each meal mightn't be balanced. They might have, just sat down to eat, 3 oranges, for example, and the next meal they might have had some meat and potatoes or something, so each meal was not necessarily balanced. And we've, now know that we don't need every single meal that we eat to be nutritionally balanced. And the children were able to balance their diet on their own just through listening to their own body. So, we already know how to eat. What's preventing us from doing that is all the rules and judgments that we have around what we should or shouldn't be eating, things that we've been taught throughout our lives that really impact how we eat. And I suppose, we lose trust in ourselves to tell us, what's right and wrong and what we should be doing. So that's sort of another reason, that diets are sort of like we just keep looking for this next thing that's going to, bring me health or change my body, rather than tuning into our own body and trusting our own body. Have any other questions?
No, but I have a confession to make.
Yeah.
So I had this nice brunch for Father's Day, and I said, I'm going to eat it when Tansy's speaking. And it was in front of me, and you asked us to look at it mindfully, smell it. I just didn't want to eat it. I would have otherwise eaten it because it's everything that I enjoy. But suddenly that was not what I wanted. So I went in and got myself a little bit of yogurt, and I seem happy with that. I would have just mindlessly eaten something, I guess, that I thought I loved, but maybe at that time my body didn't want it. So thanks for that. I'll probably eat at a later point, but right now I didn't feel like eating it.
And that's the thing with when we let go of rules, it's like, I should be eating a big meal now because it's meal time, and we're not honoring our body. And even if it's like a piece of chocolate you want or something like that, like when there's not the sort of guilt and shame around that, and just going, it's okay, that's what I felt like in that moment, and I ate and felt satisfied, and I was aware of what I was eating. And then the next meal comes along and we tune back in and go, actually, I'm now really hungry and I would like to eat all of that meal, or, I want a piece of fruit or whatever it might be. So really tuning in rather than thinking what we should or shouldn't eat. And I think sometimes with food that we think that we enjoy, like sometimes it does come from our mind. And I think sometimes, eating out can be a little bit like that. It's sort of like we think that we're going to enjoy something. But when we sit down and mindfully eat it, we realize we don't enjoy it as much. So for example, I've had people that might sort of eat, like fried food, like fried chicken and chips and things like that. And then, when they actually sit down and put it on the plate and put it in front of themselves, they're like, this isn't very appealing. There's not lots of colors here and different textures and tastes. And so although we might still want some fried chicken, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's like, maybe I want something else with this now. I would like, to chop up that cucumber that's in the fridge and add this to this and have something fresh and crunchy alongside this food. So when we sort of think of it's bad and naughty and I'm allowed to because I've just had a really tough day, we're not tuning into our body. We're still very much eating with our emotions rather than sort of stopping and thinking, is this what I really want? Or, those 2 pieces of chicken was enough to give me what I was after, and now I really would like to go and get something fresh or sweet or whatever it might be.
We have a question in the chat room from Cecilia. She's saying, so if a child likes to eat burgers all the time and doesn't want to eat anything else, do we leave the child to continue to eat the burgers?
That's a tricky one. I think there's a lot of aspects to things like that. I think children, it takes time for children to get used to new flavors and foods as well. So, I think as a parent, our role is to provide the food for our children, and then for them to choose what they do or don't eat. So in a case like that, it might be providing a small amount of, the burger or whatever they might want, or components of a burger alongside other foods as well. And when it comes to children, like say you have burger and salad, we don't want to be forcing a child to eat the salad, but just having it there and being sort of patient with them, maybe trying to put some dressing on there that they really like, or some burger bits into the salad or something like that. And for you to role model, trying different things and talking about the sensory experience of the food. When it comes to children, and it's hard, once they get to an age that they've formed these behaviours, but when they're small, it takes time, like it's about 15 exposures to a food for a child to actually be open to try a food. And small children have a tendency to stick things in their mouth and spit them out. And, as a parent, that's, frustrating, because you've got a child that's making a mess. We just want them to eat what's on their plate. But that's not how children learn to eat and to become more familiar. They're very much tactile, and they intuitively tap into all this sensory experience. They want to feel food, they want to taste it, they want to chew it up and spit it out and feel it again. And, that's part of the process of learning to eat, what do I enjoy eating? And so I think when a child's older and they've, for example, if we've had that sort of, spitting and mess, as a parent, we can sort of feel like it's just too hard to expose them to certain foods, and we just sort of give up on that a little bit. We're the tantrums and things like that can be really challenging. So I think, once a child gets older, if we haven't persisted with that, it can obviously get very hard. But just introducing foods in a non-forceful way, in an explorative way, and not necessarily focusing on it really being healthy. Like maybe we can do French fries with carrots and parsnips and give that a try. And we're not sort of focusing on, making carrots the healthiest thing ever, but it's just like, let's find some ways that we can maybe make some foods in a way that you really enjoy. Like there's, burgers with broccoli bits in them or something like that as well. It's definitely tricky once you get to that age, but I think forcing, I think we as parents, it's so easy to want to force a child to eat certain things, but they really need to sort of, I suppose it's their way of showing control is often the case. So the more we sort of fight them, the more that they will fight back and resist that. Whereas if the food's just there and there's no pressure to eat what's there, they're more likely to, potentially just pick something up with surprise. I've had parents who are surprised with their kid just spontaneously picking up a vegetable off the table that they'd never wanted to touch before. So it's tricky. Mm-hmm.
Right.